Rumors are growing louder. At first, they were little more than faint hints within narrow diplomatic circles. Then came a few cryptic mentions in obscure analytical briefs. And now, several major international outlets have reported simultaneously, Canada is considering joining BRICS. Until recently, such headlines might have been dismissed as fake news or a far-fetched hypothesis. But when Financial Times writes about it, and when sources in the Canadian Parliament and within United Nations structures confirm that negotiations are underway, the situation takes on an entirely different scale. This is no longer just a diplomatic rumor, it is a political bombshell. Canada is one of the United States' closest allies, a country with which Washington shares not only an economy, but an identity. A NATO member, part of the G7, a neighbor, a friend, a partner, and now, a possible turn toward BRICS, an alliance that Washington has already officially labeled a threat to global stability and a challenge to the world order built after the Second World War. A pivot to the east, toward Russia, China, Brazil, India, and South Africa. And this may not be just a symbolic gesture. It could be a point of no return. The reasons behind this step are becoming increasingly clear. It all began with economic pressure. Upon returning to the White House, Donald Trump chose to act quickly and aggressively. His first target, Canada. On July 15th, he signed an executive order to review all trade preferences for North American countries. Just 2 days later, new tariffs took effect on lumber, aluminum, steel, and dairy products, goods where Canada had long dominated the US market. This was followed by restrictions on Canadian pharmaceuticals and IT companies operating in the United States. All of it happened without warning, without consultation, and without any attempt at compromise. As always, the justification was posted on Truth Social. America pays too much. We're done. It's time to put America first. But behind these slogans were very specific blows to the Canadian economy. In Ottawa, it was seen as a betrayal. Trump not only undermined the economic partnership, he showed that even the closest allies were not safe from his trade fury. In response, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stated, "We will seek new markets. We will not let our future be destroyed for someone else's political ambitions." At the time, those words sounded like a diplomatic defense, but now it is clear. It was the beginning of a shift. While Washington moved toward confrontation, Beijing acted with subtlety. China began active dialogue with Ottawa, offering alternative trade routes, infrastructure investment, and technological cooperation. Delegations met in Singapore, Dubai, Shanghai, and finally, Zurich. According to Bloomberg, the latest meeting was held behind closed doors and lasted nearly 11 hours. Topics included energy, technology, agriculture, switching to yuan-based settlements, and Canada's potential accession to BRICS. Initially, this was discussed as observer status, but now, according to sources, Canada is considering full membership. That is a bombshell. No country from the Old West has ever even hinted at such a move. And if it happens, BRICS will no longer be a Global South alliance. It will become global in the full sense of the word. Washington has already realized this. The reaction was immediate. The day after the leak appeared in the media, the White House press secretary stated, "We are deeply concerned by any signals that allies may support anti-American platforms." And Trump, in his usual style, added, "If Canada goes down that path, we will crush their economy. No one trades with traitors." But the reality is that Canada has already started trading. In June, bilateral trade between Canada and China grew by 18%. A uranium supply deal with India has already taken effect. Brazil's state oil company Petrobras is opening an office in Toronto. And negotiations are underway with South Africa on joint production of platinum and rare earth metals. All of this bypassing the United States. And more than that, for the first time, Canada has expressed its willingness to switch to settlements in yuan and rupees, even if only in a trial mode. This was a clear signal. The dollar is no longer the sole anchor. According to analysts, this became a real trigger for the United States. In response, Trump ordered an additional tax on all vehicles manufactured in Canada. The automotive industry is one of the key sectors in Ontario and Quebec. The move triggered panic in the markets. Shares of General Motors Canada, Magna, and Linamar dropped by more than 9% in a single day. labor unions are now demanding immediate countermeasures from Ottawa, and Carney, it seems, is ready to go further. In a recent closed-door meeting, he stated, "We've spent too long in America's shadow. It's time to build our own axis." There is growing awareness within Canada's elite. The United States is no longer a guarantor of stability. It has become a source of risk. In this context, BRICS is offering something the US no longer can: predictability. The alliance is actively expanding investment mechanisms, building its own development bank, implementing settlements in national currencies, and providing countries with an alternative to dollar dependence. For Canada, this is not so much a choice between East and West as it is a choice between dependence and sovereignty. If it was once believed that G7 countries would never leave the dollar zone, that myth has now been shattered. Even Canada, with its deeply integrated economic ties to the United States, may begin drifting toward BRICS. And that drift is already becoming visible in symbolic gestures. The Canadian delegation attended the Economic Forum in Kazan, where they held separate meetings with representatives from Russia, China, and Iran. Canada's finance minister expressed interest in exploring the digital yuan and developing cross-border settlement platforms outside of SWIFT. For Washington, this is a betrayal. For Ottawa, it is pragmatism. But the most alarming thing for the United States is the potential chain reaction. If Canada takes this step, others may soon follow. Already, experts in the United Kingdom are discussing the possibility of creating a parallel trade track with BRICS+. In France, the political left is increasingly vocal in its criticism of dollar dependency. In Italy, the Prime Minister has hinted that Rome must remain flexible in an era of new economic blocs. And if even one G7 country joins BRICS, it will send a powerful signal to dozens of others. The very foundation of the post-war world, built on the Bretton Woods system, the dollar, and the Washington Consensus, could begin to crumble. And Canada may be the first to tip the balance. Just 6 months ago, it seemed impossible. Today, it is the subject of official negotiations. History is already changing. Against this backdrop, Trump is ramping up the pressure. He plans to impose a 35% tariff on all Canadian oil products. In response, Canada is already preparing a counterstrike, restricting US corporate access to rare earth metals and nuclear fuel. Additionally, for the first time, Canada's delegation at the United Nations abstained during a US-backed resolution against China. Another signal. The political drift is accelerating, and the great irony is that the United States is pushing its own allies into the arms of BRICS. The harder Washington squeezes, the faster the distancing becomes. The America Trump wanted to make great again could end up alone, and BRICS, which he once called an alliance of losers, is becoming the center of a new world. The upcoming BRICS summit this fall is already confirmed to include Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Argentina, and Thailand. But if a Canadian delegation shows up, even just as observers, it will shock the entire Western diplomatic establishment. And if Canada announces its intent to join, it will be a geopolitical earthquake. Washington will be left with almost no leverage. Economic sanctions against Canada would hit the US itself. Political pressure will not work, and an information campaign would only widen the rift. It is astonishing how quickly the world is changing. A country that until recently was the model of Western loyalty may soon be standing alongside China, Brazil, and Russia. This is no longer a theory. It is already becoming reality. And if the United States does not change its policy, Canada will not be the exception. It will be the beginning of a new era. The Pentagon has already launched emergency consultations on increasing its military presence in the North, fearing that Canada may shift not only economically, but also strategically in a different direction. American senators are demanding hearings on the issue of Canadian loyalty and have threatened to reconsider the NORAD defense agreement. The stock market has seen sell-offs of companies tied to trade with Canada. The agricultural sector and high-tech suppliers have been particularly affected. Media outlets are discussing an unprecedented leak. Reportedly, an internal State Department memo already considers the scenario of a de facto dissolution of the North American economic space. And in Washington itself, a realization is beginning to take shape. If Canada joins BRICS, it will not just be a blow to US prestige, it will be proof that the American unipolar era is coming to an end.